I didn't even recognize him anymore. He's not the same man I married. Those were Robyn's words, spoken in secret, shaking in fear, shock, and sorrow. And what transpired next would shake the very foundations of the Brown family. Kody Brown, the steadfast patriarch of the sister wives family, had embarked on a challenge no one could have anticipated. A journey on Special Forces, world's toughest test. But this wasn't just about physical strength. It was about change, about revealing open wounds which had hidden beneath the slick reality TV veneer for so long. And if you don't think that's outrageous, then wait until you hear what then transpired. Kody Brown had always been the rock of the Brown family. To the world outside, he was the reliable dad, the loving husband, the head of a family that had weathered scrutiny, criticism, and public fascination for years. But beneath the strategically posed reality TV smiles, something was changing. Something that would challenge him in ways that no one could ever have imagined. The choice didn't come suddenly. It started in those quiet times, midnight hours when the house was silent and the children's dream hum provided the only background noise. Kody would sit by himself, looking up at the ceiling, reflecting on the test he was about to face. Special Forces, world's toughest test. Not a show, not a competition, but a gut-wrenching, inner-examining experience designed to destroy even the most resilient individuals and rebuild them from the ground up. Robyn was the first to notice. There was a tension in his stance, an edge to his tone, a heaviness in his eyes that weren't there before. And she sensed it too, the fear that he would change, that the man she had loved and known could come back as a stranger. But underlying her concern, there was pride. Kody was taking a chance, a leap of faith, and she couldn't help but appreciate his courage even as she was scared by it. Christine, watching from her own private corner of family life, experienced something else, a combination of apprehension and wonder. She had shared almost 3 decades of life with Kody, and yet this choice made her wonder about all things. How much of him did she really know? How much had been concealed by routine, by smiles and daily interactions that were so normal but quietly defensive? Preparing for the challenge was a ritual of anticipation and fear. Every piece folded neatly into a bag was a representation of what he was leaving: family, routine, comfort, certainty. And as he secretly trained, waking before dawn to test his body to its maximum, the house itself appeared to feel it. Minor details, such as the soft thrum of the thermostat or the echo of his feet, held significance now, signaling the start of an alteration no one could halt. And if you thought that was shocking, wait until you hear what occurred the first time Kody drove his body beyond exhaustion, and how the ripples of that moment reached far beyond the training field, directly into the heart of the family he had promised to protect. The first day of Special Forces training for Kody was nothing less than brutal. The pre-dawn air nipped at his flesh, a biting reminder that there was no comfort to be had. Each challenge, each grueling physical effort, each instance of pure exhaustion peeled back the man the cameras had introduced to the world. This was rough, uncompromising, and unyielding. Mud stuck to his boots. Muscles cried out with every step, and still he pressed on, sustained by a resolve that even those who knew him best found shocking. He wasn't just pushing his body, he was pushing himself, facing every fear, every doubt, and every regret he had borne silently for decades. And with each obstacle overcome, something within him altered. Confidence replaced hesitation that had been there before, and with it, there came a quiet, unnerving vulnerability. Back at home, the absence of Kody was felt more acutely than ever. Robyn picked up on it right away. His messages were abrupt. His tone had an edge she hadn't previously experienced, and the warmth she had grown accustomed to was tinged with something richer, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Christine felt it too. The man she had spent so many years with was altering in ways she could not perceive, and it caused her to question if she had ever actually known him all along. And yet, in the midst of pain and uncertainty, there were flashes of beauty, small moments of lucidity amidst the turmoil. Kody would stop mid-challenge, gasping for air, gazing out at the horizon with an intensity that seemed to seek answers beyond physical fatigue. Every bead of sweat, every tremble of cold, Every throbbing muscle revealed a story. Here was a man facing his limits, revealing a side of himself no one had ever seen before. And just as it appeared he would break under the strain of the program, a revelation struck, one that would ripple far beyond the training fields and deep into the bosom of the Brown family. It was a truth so raw, so shocking, that even the most astute observers would find themselves struggling to comprehend the effect. And if you believe this change is just about strength or stamina, wait till you see how Kody's internal transformation started transforming his relationships, his choices, and the way the family perceived him, a shift that would compel them all to face truths they had been avoiding for so long. Meanwhile, as Kody battled the relentless adversity miles away, home life was playing out with its own subdued turbulence. His absence left an unseen burden on the household, a tension that could not be escaped. It was felt first by Robyn, a gentle tension in the air, such as before a storm. Each choice she made, each statement to the children, held a tacit knowledge: their father was no longer physically away. He was transforming, and that transformation resonated through the walls of their house. The children laughed around her, oblivious to the emotional undertows, but their laughter seemed tenuous, ephemeral. Robyn's hands quivered ever so slightly as she cooked meals, folded clothes, and managed the intricate timetable of a big family. She saw things she never saw before. The manner in which Kody's coffee mug remained on the kitchen table, unwashed, the lingering scent of his cologne on the couch, tiny things that suggested he was gone, and yet also suggested the subtle change that had already started to remake him. Christine also experienced pressure, though in a more subdued, reflective manner. Observing from her own place in the family dynamics, she couldn't help but sense that Kody's change wasn't merely corporeal. There was a certain alteration in the beat of his mind, a new resolve that induced her to doubt the basis of their years together. Was it possible the man she had known for so many years could come back the same man? Or was the journey he took started erasing the very fabric of what he was? Even Robyn's talks with the kids had an undertone. Each question, each mundane interaction, had a hint of the unspoken truth. Their home was in transition. The routine that was once comforting was now tenuous, hanging by a thread, trembling under the pressure of something bigger, something more unpredictable. And during those peaceful moments, sitting by themselves in the living room, or looking out the window, the wives could sense the change, an intangible shudder running through the family. They knew that Kody's path wasn't merely changing him, it was changing them all. And the question hung, unvoiced but pressing: when he came back, would the family be prepared for the man who would come walking in? And if you believe this tension is high, wait until you see the first message that comes through from Kody during the training, the one that rocks the family and turns everything on its head in ways no one could have imagined. Then it came. One message came through on Robyn's phone, brief, vague, and laden with significance. Just a few words, but enough to freeze her heart in mid-beat. I've changed. And not just in ways you'll see. The space around her seemed to close in. The air, which had been plain and made up of everyday things, now held import, stress, and a touch of fear. Christine, alerted by Robyn's return to silence, moved in closer, knowing this was something more than a typical message. Kody's words possessed a seriousness that no one could deny, a ripple that had at once traveled throughout the home, affecting everyone in ways unquantifiable. Robyn read the message a second time, slower this time, attempting to catch an edge she may have overlooked. Every word seemed considered, every punctuation mark a cryptic message. Kody wasn't merely stating he had changed physically. No, this was more. Emotional changes, mental adjustments, maybe even decisions he'd been grappling with for a decade, all condensed into that one haunting line. And for a moment, there was silence. The children's laughter grew faint in the background. The hum of the house, normally reassuring, seemed far off, muffled. Robyn sensed an unfamiliar mix of pride, fear, and expectation. Pride in the bravery it had taken to meet his limits. Fear of the unknown repercussions of this change. Expectation for the answers that were surely on their way. Answers that could heal or break the precariously balanced threads of their family. Christine, always introspective, observed keenly. Her mind whirled. How far had he gone? What had he learned in the isolation of his tests? And most crucially, how would his coming back change the fine-spun network of relationships he had so painstakingly constructed over the years? The heaviness of that message hung on. Each look at the clock, each soft step in the hallway, brought the silent pressure of a family holding its breath for the storm to come. And in this tense moment, there was one question hovering above everything else. When Kody came back, would the Brown family know the man who walked back through their doors? Or would they face a stranger wearing familiar skin? And if you find that shocking, just wait until you hear what occurred the very first time Kody returned to the family home, and how one simple glance triggered a chain reaction no one could have anticipated. Over the course of the hours after Kody's text, the house felt like it breathed differently. The typical thrum of day-to-day life, the clang of dishes, the thud of little feet, the quiet thrum of talk, was infused with an undercurrent of tension. Robyn sat, unobtrusively, in the living room, staring at an untouched coffee cup for several minutes. Every sip felt heavy with thought, every breath a reflection of the uncertainty that had quietly settled over her heart. Christine, in the hall adjacent to their room, sat with a notebook lying across her lap, pen unused. In her mind, she relived every conversation she had ever had with Kody throughout the decades, questioning, analyzing, and silently wondering if she had ever really gotten to know the man who had been by her side through so many decades of life. The walls that once felt so familiar and comforting now rang with questions that had no reply yet. Even the kids, happily oblivious of the grown-up worries all around them, appeared to intuit the shift. Their laughter, which had once been so free, sounded differently now, with a reluctant pause that echoed the undertow of worry running through the house. Robyn caught on, and felt a catch in her heart. How was the world supposed to continue as it was outside when their own little world was quietly rearranging itself within these walls? And within that silence, every little thing loomed large. The tremble in Robyn's hands, the soft almost imperceptible sighs of Christine, the emptiness of Kody's beloved chair by the window, all a silent witness to the deep transformation set in motion. It was during these quiet moments, removed from the lights of the cameras, removed from the prying eyes of the public, that the burden of change really fell. The emotional cost was subtle, but real. Pride in Kody's strength danced with fear of what his change did to the family, with a sorrowful undertone for the unspoken distances that were already developing between them. Questions hung in the air. Would they even know him when he came back? Would the man who had gone out for strength and clarity return with wounds, secrets, or truths too heavy to carry? And just as it was looking like the house would adapt, that the family would just patiently wait for him to come home, another ripple started. An unplanned revelation, a change in energy that was going to challenge not only Kody, but the whole family in ways they had never foreseen. And if you believe the tension is palpable now, wait until the first encounter between Kody and the wives goes down, and the full extent of his change is realized. Kody came home, but there was a heavy atmosphere of unseen tension. The man who entered the door was familiar in form, in presence, but everything about him seemed different. The assurance in his stride was keener, more calculated, and his eyes they had stories no one had ever seen before. Stories of fatigue, grit, and epiphanies that had formed in the silence, bitter crucible of his special forces experience. His wives picked it up immediately. Robyn, who happened to be standing in the doorway, picked up on the subtle change in his energy. There was something unspoken there, a heaviness in his stance, a pause in his movements that suggested experiences he wasn't yet prepared to share. Christine observed from afar, her heart torn between relief at seeing him alive and apprehension at the subtle things she was yet unable to describe. It wasn't only the physical change. Kody had come back bearing truths, minor yet profound, that could not be dismissed. A glance lasted a fraction of a second longer than it normally would, a tone of voice just a shade tougher, a pause in conveying ancient jokes, all suggested the inner realignment he had experienced. Even the smallest detail was eloquent. The manner in which he gripped a mug, the quiet tension at the tops of his shoulders, the quiet intensity in the eyes, and then the first whispers of secrets, bits of aha, that suggested changes beyond anyone could have imagined. He wrote of physical endurance plus something more, of moments that compelled him to face his fears and regrets, of decisions he had considered that no one in his hometown could possibly grasp. These were not revelations designed to alarm, but their significance could not be dismissed. For Christine and Robyn, the room had somehow shrunk, as if each wall was pressing in with the weight of the unsaid. Questions churned below the surface. How much of him had changed? Would he tell them everything? Or were some things destined to be locked behind eyes that had witnessed too much? And what would the hidden truths be worth to the tenuous balance of their home, already precariously held together through years of polygamous intricacy? The tension hung there, almost palpable, lingering in every room of the house. It was apparent that this change was not merely Kody's journey. It was a family journey, one that would require adaptation, confrontation, and resiliency from all involved. And if you thought that was intense, just wait until you see how the first confrontation goes down, and how one little move on the part of Kody triggers a chain reaction no one in the family was prepared for. The tension that had been building quietly for weeks finally boiled over the moment Kody fully re-entered the home. It wasn't explosive or loud at first. No slamming doors, no yelling, but a crash of feelings quiet but debilitating filled every room of the house. Every look, every movement, every silence had significance. Robyn and Christine sensed it, like standing in the midst of a storm where the wind has not yet shattered the trees, but bends them almost to the ground. Kody's presence was different, authoritative but controlled. He moved from room to room with a fervor that was difficult to identify, speaking softly but strongly. His words weighed and calculated. And yet below that calm, there was this quiet tension, this vulnerability none of the family had ever seen. It wasn't merely the physical stamina he had lived through. It was the emotional change, the psychological changes, the inner struggles waged in the dark moments of training and isolation. Robyn sensed it first. A faint edge in his tone, a hesitation before responding to her queries, a trepidation that served to betray the things he had seen. Her thoughts whirled. Was he pulling away? Or was this an indication of growth, of emerging into a person stronger but unattainable? Christine, watching in silence, experienced a shiver of doubt too. Her mind flashed between pride in his success and worry about what this new incarnation of Kody could portend for the fragile family dynamics they had worked so diligently to establish. The small things were made enormous. The manner in which he steered clear of some topics, the knowing glances that were left unspoken, the silence where smiles used to echo. Every moment suggested secrets being brought home, lessons from adversity, and truths no one could have foreseen. And then the first fissures. Silent battles over traditions, faint rebellions against established rules, and the tightrope tension of implied expectations clashed with the new Kody. The room, already charged with expectation, seemed to coalesce, compacting the feelings into almost intolerable pressure. And if you think that is tough, just wait till you see what goes down in the very first real confrontation. One look, a slight movement, and the family will know just how profound Kody's metamorphosis actually is. However, we've only experienced one part of the situation. What wasn't taped, what the family didn't quite understand at first, is that Kody's metamorphosis wasn't merely physical. It was deeply emotional and spiritual. The struggles he had in special forces compelled him to deal with aspects of himself he had been avoiding for a very long time. Insecurities, regrets, fears, and decisions he had put off for decades. And yet this inner transformation was not without a price. As much as he had become stronger, more confident, more resolute, he had also become a stranger in ways the family couldn't grasp at the time. His silence was more oppressive, his looks weighed more, and the slightest motions were laden with meaning. Every step he took back into the home was a reminder that though the body can withstand, the mind and heart bear wounds unseen by the eye. Robyn and Christine started to observe little changes. A once effortless joke now sounded forced. A dialogue that previously brought laughter now had pauses punctuated by thought. Even mundane habits, The manner in which Kody poured his coffee in the mornings, the slight rigidity in his shoulders as he grabbed his mail, told stories. He was there, but he wasn't the same husband who departed weeks earlier. And yet, in the midst of tension, there was an odd beauty. Kody's transition had also brought clarity, a new sense of purpose, a clearer focus, and a quiet honesty that could no longer be denied. He was finding truths about himself that even the family could learn from, if only they would look beyond the tears of transformation and discern the path he had walked. The emotional roller coaster of expectation, fear, pride, and anxiety continued to swirl around the family. And for the audience, the question remained in the air. Could a family built on routine, on decades of familiarity, accommodate a patriarch who had been fundamentally changed? And if you thought tension was high enough already, just wait and hear how Kody's initial private epiphany with Robyn and Christine sets off a chain reaction. Just one little truth that will challenge all the relationships in the Brown family, leaving hearts exposed and emotions bare. It is in the slightest details that the truth is hidden. It is in the big gestures, the flamboyant declarations, the blazing arguments that it is easily visible. But the change that Kody had undergone was inscribed in more subtle signs, in the gentle gestures and passing glances that most observers would overlook unless they were paying attention. A tap of the finger on the countertop, a moment of hesitation before responding to a question, a quick glance that lingered a second too long. These were the tells that signaled how much he had altered. Each slight flutter of his lips, each minute adjustment in posture, bore the burdens of experiences with which no one back home could ever hope to relate. Robyn was the first to see them. As Kody sat at the kitchen table, folding the morning's mail, she observed the way his eyes stayed on a family photograph, and then wandered off into blank spaces, far away and contemplative. His hands, so strong and so steady in every physical test he had ever overcome, now quivered ever so lightly when confronted with the quiet frenzy of daily existence. It was barely discernible, but for Robyn it was an epiphany. Christine, sitting across the room, caught on too, the tiny pause before a laugh, the slight stiffening of his shoulders, the way he skirted certain areas of the house. Each little movement said something, a rich history of fighting, grit, and self-transformation. Even the children unwittingly felt it. Kody's new presence, more intentional, more passionate, altered the home cadence. The energy once familiar and reassuring now had an undercurrent of uncertainty. Every little move, every look, every quiet moment was a cue, a signal of transition that could not be sidestepped. And in those micro details, the wives came to realize that Kody's change wasn't merely physical stamina. It was a revolution of the mind, one that would shift the dynamic of their family. It was in those quiet signals, in the most minute details of everyday interactions, that the true tale was playing out. And if you find the tension settle now, just wait until the first actual confrontation comes. When one of these little gestures sets off an emotional storm, compelling the family to confront truths they had been avoiding for a long time. The point of no return came softly first, almost unnoticeably. Kody stood in the living room, the burden of weeks gone, and the unseen struggles he had waged weighing him down. The air was thicker, electric with expectation. Robyn and Christine observed intently, not sure whether to say something or remain silent, knowing that something momentous was going to happen. Each movement, each breath, each blink was loaded with meaning. Kody's shoulders, once loose, now squared themselves with a tension that spoke of both determination and fragility. His eyes raked the room, settling for a moment on the familiar though somehow altered space of his house. Even the children, unaware of the emotional tempest, stopped in their play, sensing some slight disruption of the beat of their family. Next was the first exchange. A cautious question from Robyn, nicely phrased, probing the waters. Kody's answer was considered, his tone even but overlayered with the vehemence of the ordeal he had survived. And in that moment, the room was a crucible of feeling, fear and pride and uncertainty and love entwined, each of them overlying and amplifying the rest in a fine, almost intolerable tension. Christine took a step closer, her own pulse ringing in the silence. She saw everything. The way Kody's fingers drummed against the armrest. The pause before he looked straight at her. The tiny catch in his throat when talking about times of struggle he'd encountered. Every little thing signaled that the man standing in front of them had been radically transformed. Not merely physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. Arguments and silent confrontations started to play out. Spoken words measured but cutting. Looks loaded with unvoiced questions. The balance of the family, which had been kept intact over years, was now hanging by a thread. Each choice Kody had made along the way had significance. And the consequence was swift and far-reaching. And just when it appeared that the tension could not become any more oppressive, one single revelation fell. A truth so intimate, so surprising, that it was in danger of destroying the tenuous balance of the family. The room was silent for a moment, heart throbbing, eyes agog with expectation. And if you thought this was intense, wait until the next scene, when Kody's vulnerability crashes into years of family pressure. In a hurricane no one in the Brown family ever could have anticipated. The room became silent, not the quiet of harmony, but the heavy silence that follows a storm, when hearts are racing and minds race faster than words can come. Kody sat by himself, reclining in the chair, looking at a place on the floor, as if it contained answers that he alone could read. All of his body muscles eased up a notch, but tension remained in the edges of his eyes, the furrows of his face, the faint quiver of his fingers. Robyn stepped back into the kitchen, holding a mug she had not touched, the tension of the confrontation weighing in her chest. There was a sense of relief that Kody had come back, that he was safe, but an unshakable pain of doubt. The man standing before her was recognizable, and yet deeply altered. Could she learn to live with this new man? Could she grasp the truths he bore in silence? The times he had endured by himself, so far from the familiar home that was now alien in his absence. Christine, standing quietly in the other hallway, thought about her own experience with Kody. Years of shared history, of habit and comfort, now hung in the balance against the backdrop of his change. She observed the little things, the manner in which he skirted some sections of the room, the changes in tone, when he did speak, the moment of hesitation before the smile. All the details whispered a tale of survival, of secrets revealed, and of truths that would take years yours to grasp. Even the children, feeling the change without realizing why, crept along, their playful vigor subdued by the new pace of the home. There was laughter, but it was tentative, interrupted by looks at the adults who had been quietly remolded by events that lay beyond their grasp. In that quiet, the gravity of Kody's journey came down upon the family, not as a conclusion, but as a new beginning. A messy chapter that needed adjustment, forbearance, and compassion. The emotional tempest had passed, but the reverberations still lingered in small things. A sigh, a look, a hand touching a child's shoulder, a reluctant conversation. And in that silence, everything shifted. The Brown family had seen a change not only of the body, but of the heart and mind, and the repercussions would echo through every encounter yet to be had. And if you believe this stillness is easy, wait until you witness the questions it brings. Questions that none of them can avoid. And that could change what it means to really know the man who came back home. Moments passed and still. Deliberate moments. The Brown home was no longer the same. Laughter and talk and habit had returned. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Kody's journey, his rigorous physical trials, his inner demons, his emotional transformation, had left an imprint far greater than anyone could have projected. Robyn, Christine, and the children too bore fragments of this change in appearance, movement, and demeanor. Small things, a passing look, a hesitation in speech, a moment's pause and laughter, they all told volumes about the burden of change. The house pulsed with unsaid questions, with the tension of adjustment, with the knowledge that the man who had come back was not the man who had gone away. Kody himself was still contemplative, still silent, still reflective. His eyes, now so familiar to her, now were filled with depth, experience, and unspoken intensity. Each movement, each choice, was weighted with the aftermath of what he had suffered, and what he had learned. And yet, despite how strong, how resilient, he had come to be, the ultimate question lingered. Would the family be able to grow with him, accept the change, and see the man that he had become? Or would the change breed space too great to span? There were no simple answers. Routine had resumed in life. But under the surface, there was still curiosity. Questions that could not be answered immediately lingered in every room. How much change can you sustain? How much bending can a family do before it snaps? And perhaps most of all, how do you keep loving someone who is both familiar and strange at the same time? The Browns had weathered criticism, opinion, and the travails of a life of polygamy. But Kody's path had opened up a new frontier, one that pushed not just strength but compassion, understanding, and flexibility. And the thing was, this tale did not have a tidy ending. It just kept going on, inexorably, in looks, in gestures, in unspoken dialogue. And now we leave you with this question. How far can a person transform before the ones who love them no longer recognize who they are? What would you do if the person you've known for decades returned, changed in ways both visible and invisible? The answers aren't easy, and the story isn't over.